Norwegian salmon that I asked for? Because I need my omega-3s.
I think at some point or another, we all feel stressed or anxious or overwhelmed by our finances. And although budgeting is by no means a tool that solves every money problem out there, I do think it's a really great tool to use to face your money problems head on and really take an intentional approach to your financial position. So today's video is all about budgeting, where to start, how to make one, how to stick to one, my tips and tricks. And whenever I do these videos or any type of video, really, I like to highlight that I am not a money expert. I'm just a human figuring it out as I go. And these are the things that I've learned that have worked for me. And hopefully by sharing them, you get some ideas or inspiration for your own budgeting journey. If you're not already, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss future adulting type content. I like to do a lot of that. And also there is a free PDF containing spending trackers for an entire year that you can get by entering your email in the link that I've included in the description box below. Let's get this money talk going. Ooh, ah. Before you can plan for a future you, I am a firm believer that you have to understand the past you. So I think one of the first steps that you have to do before even starting a budget is understand what your spending habits are. And the best way to do that for me is to review like 3 months worth of spending. And when I go through this process, I don't just like to look at the spending that I've done. I like to kind of categorize the type of money that's left my accounts between two categories, expenses and spending. Expenses are those things like rent, mortgage, bills, even subscriptions, things I'm not actively deciding to have leave my account. They're just kind of like automatic zoop. That was a really great loop sound to describe money leaving my account. But spending are things I am actively deciding to, put my card down for or put cash down for. And that's things like food, home, beauty, the list of categories goes on, entertainment. And I do think it's really great to, within that category, divide those purchases within those different categories, because those numbers are going to be really great benchmarks for helping you figure out your budget later down the line. You can see which categories you spend the most in, which you spend the least in. For me, in the spending category, food is always the one that is way higher than all the others. I should note that this process can bring about a lot of guilt and shame when it comes to looking at our past purchases. I definitely have those like, oh Caitlin, oh no Caitlin, like why did you make this decision, or what were you thinking moments. But if you let yourself get consumed by that, then you're not going to want to even confront your finances, and there's no changes that you'll ever really make. But if you flip it and think, okay, instead of guilt and shame, I'm going to use this to empower me to make better money choices going forward, that is a much more positive and, I guess, productive way of thinking. We're human. We're not going to be perfect spenders, and that's okay. Still not a perfect spender, still make money regrets, but I like to think that I'm getting better at making less of them because I'm more active with where my money is going. I'm paying attention. This is also a good point to analyze your current savings plan, to see where your debt is currently at. Ask yourself, what is your relationship with money? Is it something you worry about, lose sleep over? Is it something you don't think about at all? All of these things can really help inform the direction of your budget going forward. There are a lot of different methods for making a budget. Neither one of them are better or worse than the other. There's just whatever is the right or better fit for you and what interests you the most, because you want it to be something that you want to use. There are things like Excel, Google spreadsheets, which I love using Excel for budgeting because it's like a custom calculator. It's a great time. There's online apps and websites that do it for you. There's pen and paper. I like to show budgeting spreads in my bullet journal videos, so I'll include a link to a few videos that contain those spreads in the description box below. You can find templates online. Options are really endless. The process of making a budget for me makes the most sense to start with your monthly income. And then like if you're self-employed like me, subtract your taxes. But if you're with an employer, they're probably already taking those out for you. And then to subtract your savings. So the savings is really like the first thing that I take out, because that's that's paying a future you. Putting money into savings, long-term or short-term, is benefiting a future self. And I find like that is a big priority for me. So that's like the first thing that comes out before anything else. And I take that amount and I subtract fixed expenses, like I mentioned earlier, bills, mortgage, rent, etc., etc. And what's left is what I divvy up or allocate to the different categories within spending. People ask me a lot about, how do I know how much to allocate to all of these different categories? Well, for one, your fixed expenses are pretty much going to be the same unless you make some adjustments to like lower your bills. When it comes to how to allocate your money to spending, that's where I find it really helpful to have that previous knowledge of your spending, because that is a benchmark that you can use when you create your own budget. I personally find that a better strategy than just using standard percentages that are found online or in books. Not that those can't be helpful, but I'm under the perspective that, we're humans. Humans are different. We all live different lives and have different contexts to our lives. So our budgets are just going to look different depending on like our needs. That's why I find like, using your past history is a good tool to use, because if there are things you want to lower or you don't want to spend as much money on, that's fine. But at least it'll be like geared towards your life and your needs. And hopefully that'll make it more likely that you'll be able to stick to it as well. Now, if you don't have a predictable income like myself that you can use as a main point to subtract from, then I basically go about the same process of creating a budget, but I do addition rather than subtracting. So I start again with my savings amount, and I take my savings and I add it to fixed expenses, which are pretty much given because my expenses are the same whether I have predictable income or not. And then I look at that number and I look at my, average monthly income and gauge what is a realistic amount that I can have as my spending amount. From there, I'll look at that spending amount and divvy it up much like I would in the previous example. And if you're self-employed or have any sort of unstable income, I find a budget is more important than ever, and following one is more important than ever, because if you can't have predictability with the income that comes in, then at least you can predict the income that's coming out. Now, creating a budget is great, but if you are not also tracking your spending throughout the month, then I think it loses a lot of its effectiveness. Because the problem that often comes into play with money is that we think we know how much we've spent, but when you really sit down and analyze what money you spent, say this week, you realize all those small purchases that you think are insignificant that you forget about actually add up. So it's important to have some sort of method for tracking your spending, whether it's using your online banking app or some other sort of app, or just pen and paper again, Excel again. A lot of those options for making a budget are also really good for making a spending tracker. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, I do have a spending tracker template for the entire year that you can access by clicking the link in the description box below. You can print it and use it. You can use it on your computer, and it's even programmed so that it will add the totals for you, so you don't even have to whip out a calculator. Or you can just use it as inspo for creating a spending tracker of your own, but I wanted to help you out and give you some sort of resource there, so be sure to check out that link in the description box below. Make a point of adding fun to your budget. I think people often think of budgets as boring or restrictive because we create it with this idea of a very idealistic view of who we are, when we really don't factor in reality into it. And the reality is we are humans, and most of us have hobbies and enjoy things, and we want to account for that. And obviously there are times in our lives where we have to be more frugal than others, so we do have to be more restrictive. But even dedicating a small amount of funds, there are a lot of budget-friendly activities and fun to be had. So even a small amount is good to have in your budget, because it makes it a priority and shows you that yes, it's important to be smart with your money, but it's also great to enjoy your money too. Money is a great fun thing. It can be. It doesn't always have to be really scary or intimidating. So I think you know, sprinkling those confetti moments into the budget is a great way to even keep you more on track with your budgeting. I mentioned earlier how much I am a big believer in saving and paying a future you, and saving long-term, short-term is really important. Like I personally have long-term savings, but I'm a big short-term saver in terms of like having an emergency fund, because like I mentioned, I work for myself, my income is unpredictable. So I like to make sure that if there's a period where zero money comes into my bank account, I don't have to panic for a good amount of time. Like I have like a safety net. And whether you have predictable income or not, I think 2020 has shown that having an emergency fund, that safety net, is so important, because you just never know what a year has in store for you. And that emergency fund allows me to sleep a lot better at night, because I know that I'm going to be okay and I'll have time to figure it out if circumstances ever change. But I think saving for the sake of saving, because you think it's just something you should be doing, is hard to do. Like it's hard to feel excited about. Figure out like, what do you want for your future? Do you envision yourself owning a home or property? Do you see changes to your lifestyle that you want in your future? Do you want to retire by a certain age? If you know the answers to those questions, then when you're saving, you're not just like putting money away and saying don't touch it. Because when you say don't touch something, that's like the first impulse is you're like, I want to touch it. But if you're like, oh, that thing that I'm saving for is actually for something that I want more than touching that money, then that makes it a little less tempting to dig into, and probably will mean that you're gonna, again, stay better on track. It's like, how can we motivate ourselves to stay on track? And I think a great way to do this too when it comes to saving is, if you're gonna save for big things like big non-sexy things like investments or emergency funds, then also make some fun saving goals. Like if you have a new computer or a coat that you really want, something a little bit more luxe that you wouldn't normally just like, you know, buy, then create like a little section in your budget for saving money for that. And it might be something that takes weeks or months or maybe even years to get to, but at least that's like a more fun savings goal that you can look forward to, and you get to experience the benefit of a little bit maybe earlier than you would those really big chunkier savings goals. Schedule in finance check-in days in advance to your calendar, whether it's once a quarter or twice a year, to see, you know, what are my money goals, what is my budget looking like, and do those two things align? And if they don't, you can make changes. If they do, then at least you know alignment is happening. If you're someone who has a hard time with impulse shopping, something that's really helped me curb a lot of impulse shopping this year is asking myself the question, would I forget about this thing or these things tomorrow if I were not to purchase it? If the answer to that question is yes, then I reconsider whether or not that's something I really need to purchase. Sometimes I still do make the purchase, but at least I know it's been made with intention. There's a rush that you can feel in the store when you're looking at something and thinking, oh my gosh, I need this thing. It's gonna change my life. Those oven mitts, oh my gosh, so cute. That spatula, big win, need to take it home. And then when you take it home, you have those moments a few days later where you're like, wow, that oven mitt really didn't make me feel more put together, or that spatula is actually kind of dingy. I can't believe I spent money on that. It's really weird examples that I used there. I'm not sure why I used oven mitt and spatula as impulse purchases. That is such a Caitlin thing to say as an impulse purchase. I should have said something like a top or a lipstick at Sephora. There we go. More relatable things. I know Ariana Grande has made us believe that I see it, I like it, I want it, I buy it is a great philosophy for life, but we don't all got Ariana Grande money, unfortunately. So alas, we must sometimes see it, like it, want it, and not buy it, which would not be a very good lyric for a hit on the radio, but oh, reality. What is your number one budgeting tip? Let me know in the comment section down below. Make that comment section just filled with value, both for me and for others who come and see the video. And if you want to see more videos like this, leave those requests down there as well. Like the video if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Check out that link in the description box below for my PDF spending trackers. And I will see you all very soon with a new video. Until then, bye everyone.